was sort of a guide that I didn't know consciously when I first started doing this, and I guess it comes more and more conscious as I got older, is I often ask myself, how with the skill sets I have, which are still quite limited. I mean, I'm not a molecular biologist or politician or anything, but how can I take the skills that I have with their limitations and who I am and have the biggest positive impact on the world? That's kind of the guide that I've tried to use.
Welcome to Unnatural Selection, a show about competition, innovation, and the strategies shaping tomorrow's frontiers. I'm Nick Encina. Each week, we speak with pioneers shaping the future.
Episode 17 of Unnatural Selection is a masterclass in scientific leadership and innovation strategy. We explore how breakthroughs in bioengineering and nanotechnology emerge from environments that foster talent, creativity, and bold thinking. Learn how to spot high-impact opportunities, lead visionary teams, and take calculated risks to turn big ideas into world-changing realities, all through the lens of one of the foremost scientific pioneers in human history. In this episode, we trace the long path that led to a breakthrough in drug delivery. We talk about persistence, institutional patience, and how foundational work, done years before its value is clear, can quietly change the world. Our guest is Dr. Robert Langer. Bob is one of 9 institute professors at MIT. Being an institute professor is MIT's highest honor. His articles have been cited over 446,000 times. His H-index of 331 is the highest of any engineer in history. His patents have been licensed or sub-licensed to over 400 companies. He is a co-founder of many companies, including Moderna. He holds 44 honorary doctorates and has received over 220 awards, including both the United States National Medals of Science and Technology and Innovation, one of 3 living individuals to have received both honors, and has been elected to the National Academies of Medicine, Engineering, Sciences, and Inventors. Let's go.
And I'm also privileged to be able to say that I was a part of one of his startups early on, Transform Pharmaceuticals. So with that, Bob, welcome to Unnatural Selection.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I just want to get started with my general question, because I'm sure people would want to hear from your perspective, Bob. But what need or impact drives your work?
Well, I think it's a combination of scientific curiosity on the one hand, but also impact in terms of doing the most good for people in the world scientifically.
And if we look back, I mean, your impact has been so profound and so long lived. But looking back at where things originally started, what moments or influences in your early life set you on a path to becoming not just a scientist, but such a persistent, boundary pushing innovator?
Well, I think they're different things. Like scientist probably in a way goes back to when I was a little boy and my parents gave me these Gilbert sets, like Gilbert chemistry set, microscope set, things like that. I think actually then I think in college and graduate school, I got very involved in teaching and helping even start a school for low income high school students. And I think that I got a lot of satisfaction out of that. And I felt I was good at it. And so that I really showed me that I got a lot of satisfaction out of helping people.
Hmm.
So when I tried to do my postdoc work, because I don't feel the research I did up until then really did help people that much. I mean, it was research, it was scientific papers. But then my postdoc work, I think that was the next big thing, which was Judah Folkman, who was my advisor and working at Boston Children's Hospital. And there I could see research could make a huge difference in terms of doing things that might create new treatments for cancer and other diseases. So I think it's a combination of those influences. Yes, it doesn't answer the question about persistence, but that might be just genetic.
Well, I was going to actually follow up on that, because when you already achieve more than most, what made you keep going? It's, because your influence has been so uh, out disproportionate to what most other scientists and engineers do. Was there an inflection point where you realized that you could do this at scale versus in a linear way?
Well, I mean, I don't, you never know what thing you do exactly will lead to impact. I mean, a good example goes back 50 years to when we created the first, tiny particles that could deliver large molecules like nucleic acids. I mean, I was excited at the time. I thought it was an important thing, but I certainly didn't know, say, COVID was going to happen, or that Moderna, I'd get involved in starting Moderna many years later, and that we'd create a vaccine that, ultimately, I suppose, billions of people used and still use, but
Yeah.
and many other things as well. But I think that it's a combination of things over time that uh, you try to think how can it was sort of a guide that I didn't know consciously when I first started doing this, and I guess it comes more and more conscious as I got older. Is I often ask myself, how with the skill sets I have, which are still quite limited. I mean, I'm not a molecular biologist or politician or anything, but how can I take the skills that I have with their limitations and who I am, and have the biggest positive impact on the world? That's kind of the guide that I've tried to use.
And I guess a subsequent question to that is, with so many opportunities of taking your skills and your technologies in almost endless directions in healthcare, how do you prioritize some ideas over others? Do you have like a framework or an intuition that you rely on when deciding which problems to tackle, especially when their time and resources are limited?
Yeah. Well, I suppose impact. I mean, perceived impact. It's not I'm always right, but it's perceived impact. I mean, what will have the biggest positive effect on the most people? But it's a
So,
perception. It's an educated guess.
well, more educated than most, I would say, because you definitely had a long string of successes, and with I guess from that perspective, with so many different kind of like shots at goal that you've taken, and many of them have actually connected. Um, of all the many technologies and therapies that you've helped bring to life, which accomplishments have been the most personally meaningful?
Well, I mean, first of all, I also have had a lot of failures too. I think that's
Oh,
important
yeah.
to realize. But and by the way, and this is a sort of a separate point, but very relevant. I often say people that are most successful are the ones that know how to deal with failure well, because success, that's easy to deal with. Failure is not. That being said, in terms of whenever somebody asks me that kind of question, usually I say the success of my students. That they have done so incredibly well. I think we've had probably 1,000 people pass through the lab, and they're leaders all over the world in terms of taking and making biomedical engineering important. But I suppose if I were to pick one thing that I did, just research wise, probably would be the thing that I said before, which was our 1976 Nature paper showing for the first time that you could deliver large molecules from tiny particles. And that was important both because people said it wasn't possible, and ultimately because it did make a big difference in a lot of different ways.
Hmm. And you mentioned all the scientists and entrepreneurs that you have in your lab. Um, what distinguishes the ideas or people who succeed in translating breakthrough science and actually translating it to real world impact from those that don't? Do you see a pattern in the ideas that actually break out, or the people that break out, and things that others might be able to do to try to achieve those accomplishments?
Well, I think it's the people. I mean, and actually, every time you really, it's a team of people, and so I think you have to, if to do translation. I mean, a lot of times that could be moving things into the clinic. It could be having a company, but it's really a team of people that work well together, that don't give up, that do, because you are going to have roadblocks. You just don't know what they are when you start, and it's just being willing to walk through walls to make your ideas work.
Hmm. And I guess from that perspective, and I would imagine that your lab right now is focused on dozens of different things. But when you've influenced different fields from diverse drug delivery, um, drug design, as Transform was back in the day, tissue engineering, mRNA therapeutics, What do you see as the next scientific frontier that will have such a comparable and multi-decade ripple effect through human health? What area are you particularly excited about right now?
Well, I always say it's an area that doesn't have a name yet because it hasn't been discovered. And it is the value of basic and early stage research. I mean, some of the hot areas right now are, genetic therapies, which also includes cellular therapy, which includes things like CAR T cells and things like them, and then regenerative medicine. But if you really just to pick CRISPR as an example, if you ask somebody that question that you asked me back in 2011, nobody would have said, CRISPR or gene editing, because really the key papers hadn't been written yet. And so I think that there's always that to me has been a great value of science, that you and curiosity driven science, that you can make discoveries that will change the world, but it's hard to give them a name because like I say, they haven't been done yet. But
Mhm.
they will be, and that's if you look back at history, that's happened over and over again.
You mentioned also failures. I've helped start a number of companies, and there are successes and failures as well. And I look back sometimes at things that maybe at the time didn't work, but now might. Do you look back at any of those failures that you mentioned that you're like, you know what, I still believe in that, and maybe we should give it another crack.
Sure. Well, I mean, failure is it depends how one looks at failure. A lot of times we've created core technologies. So what I mentioned, and we've started companies. And some of those companies, I suppose, by different standards, have been failures in the sense that they didn't make money or they could have gone under or whatever. And, we did start nanoparticle companies, nanoparticle company, and it didn't do well. But nanoparticles, of course, which is a core technology that we helped start, that changed the world with companies like Moderna and BioNTech and others. And I think that can often happen when you create a core technology. You sometimes it's having the right targets with that technology.
Hmm. Are there stories of an idea, a company that almost didn't make it, but changed the world because you fought for it behind the scenes? I think you mentioned in that early paper, people said it couldn't be done, but you still proved that it could. Are there other such stories where you kind of felt that most people didn't believe that it was possible, but science proved otherwise?
Well, I don't know if it's science proving over otherwise. Certainly, there are companies that we'd started that and you always fight for them. I mean, no matter what, you're always fighting for them, and for the ideas, of course, that they put forth. At least I always do. So I keep believing in them, even the ones that haven't done as well. They may get a reincarnation in different ways, like the example that I mentioned. Sometimes it's having the right molecule to put in the right delivery system, as an example. So, but I think always I believe in these things, so I keep trying. And sure, lots of times the stocks of some of these companies have gone extremely low, or the company, may have come close to going out of business. But we kept trying, and they, different. I mean, different ones that I've been involved with, that certainly happened.
Hmm. And you said something earlier that, some of the things that bring the most pride to you are the students that you've had and how you've been able to affect their lives. And so, from that perspective, you've built a culture of innovation in your lab that's produced more successful founders than perhaps any other single academic group. What principles or practices have been most crucial in sustaining that environment over decades? Is it a virtue of who gets to work in your lab, or do you actually have methodologies or a culture or processes that help nurture that and foster innovation and creativity and risk taking?
Yeah, I think both. I think one, I've been very fortunate being at MIT, and I've had wonderful, wonderful students and postdocs, and we do get lots and lots of applications, and we've had the fortune of having really talented, smart, persistent people. But I also think I learned a lot from the man I mentioned to you earlier, Judah Folkman, who was my boss um, when I was a postdoc, and he, believed anything was possible. I think that's my interpretation of how he was, and he also used what I'd call positive reinforcement. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people would come to me, like in an interview like this, and they say, "Well, Bob, do you tell people they have to work hard, because they come to my lab, they see people are all working all hours of the day or night. And do you order them to work hard?" And I say, no, I don't do that at all. I always tell them, I'd always hope that I get across to people that if they're successful, that'll make a giant difference to the world, to a lot of people. And I'd call that positive reinforcement, that you sort of lead by making sure that people understand that they're doing something that can just have a giant impact, and even and not discouraging ideas. Even if it's not a great idea, there's still some bright lights in those ideas, and trying to get people to get along well. I think that's also something you want to create a really positive environment. But beyond that, I think that probably the environment we have, we do high risk projects. I tell people failure's okay. We have a super interdisciplinary lab, maybe 10 to 15 different disciplines, so people interact with each other, and I think we all grow from each other.
Do the different disciplines in your lab work in silos, or are they interdisciplinary? When I've interviewed amazing people from early pioneers at Kodak to even the tennis coach of Serena and Venus Williams, it's amazing how many parallels there are in team building, in cross pollination of ideas and training, and so I was wondering about that, because academia tends to be, or academics sometimes tend to be very defensive and protective of their ideas. And so, from that perspective, it sounds like your lab is much more interdisciplinary and collaborative versus competitive.
I'd say that's right. Yeah, we have people working in teams, and so I think that that's work.
Um, and so, if we think about students out there that are maybe in college or high school and they're listening to this right now, the world that we live in today is flooded by pressures to specialize, publish, fundraise, go viral, what have you. What should young innovators actually focus on today if they want to create lasting impact in science?
Well, I don't think there's any one thing. I think it's trying to do things that they feel they have a passion for, that they believe can make a big difference in the world. I don't know that there's any one thing.
Yeah. Are there particular fields that you would recommend people to look into as kind of areas? I mean, we spoke about CRISPR briefly, but areas that you would recommend? Because I get often people that come to me and say, well, with how quickly science is evolving and the advent of AI, what's a field that a person could have an impact, a lasting impact, and be competitive in a world that's going to be digitized so fiercely over the next few years and decades and beyond? Are there particular areas that you think lend themselves more to that human AI partnership in developing right now?
Well, AI is something that can be useful in almost anything, but I still think basic biology, basic chemistry, basic physics, basic engineering. I mean, those are really all key areas, and asking big questions in those areas is, I think, what's going to be important.
Yeah. Um, so if we think about um, the pace of innovation that your lab has been in, um, and it crosses so many different disciplines. Uh, how do you stay engaged in all these different projects? Is it something that you stay very engaged in, kind of like day to day, or is it something you're more a little bit hands off and check in periodically? How do you guide that development towards a field that, giving your perspective and your vantage point, you can advise in the direction that things develop?
Yeah, I'd like to think I do both. I mean, I get tons of emails from the students, meetings with students. I often have relatively short meetings rather than long ones. We have seminars and get-togethers, but you know, but I still feel like I'm not a micromanager by any means. I'm sort of more somebody who tries to ask big questions, get great people, turn people loose, and so I'm not I'm sort of the opposite of a micromanager.
Okay. And are there any specific areas right now that draw your attention more than others that are you're working in your lab, things that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I'm excited about all of them, but I mean, right now we're doing a lot with the Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation on creating new medicines and new delivery systems for the billions of people in the developing world. We're still very active, doing a lot of work on nanotechnology for uh, delivering, different types of genetic therapies. And we're doing a tremendous amount of work in this whole area of tissue engineering and regenerative medicine to make new tissues and organs and make tissues and organs in vitro, like on a chip.
It's fascinating. And do you see, and I guess obviously if you're working with a Gates organization to do that, do you see a path towards um, equal access to these new technologies? Obviously, when new technologies and medicines come out, they typically cost an extraordinary amount because of all the R&D that goes into them, and then over time, they diffuse through society. You mentioned that you're working with the Gates Foundation right now to be able to deliver some of this to the developing world. How do you rationalize the effort that goes into building it, but then also making them equitable and accessible around the world?
Yeah, well, I think first you have to prove that you can do it. And
Hmm.
a lot of these things that we work on, a lot of people would say, wouldn't be possible. And yet I'd like to think we've made them possible. Then and accessibility it comes in a number of ways. It's obviously cost is one of them. So you have to, make them with materials that are inexpensive enough. But there are other challenges too for accessibility. A lot of times they have to be heat stable. The environments are very, very different. And then, of course, there's things that people, I think, like the press in particular, that happened with the vaccines. I mean, a lot of the things did get to the developing world, but they didn't have the infrastructure to get them to the patients, to get them to the people, the roads, the everything. So I think that that's something, unfortunately, that I can't control or I can't do other than the fact that we are also trying to help several different groups in Africa, different countries in Africa, with biotechnology companies and trying to help train their students. So because ultimately you have to have the countries themselves, you know, realize these things, and so I've been trying to help on all those fronts.
Yeah, it this definitely resonates with me. So, one of the things that I run right now, I'm a president of the International Consortium on Newborn Sequencing. So, we bring together all of the leading researchers that are bringing genomics to newborns and doing it at scale at population levels. And a lot of the leading countries there, are your typical US, European countries, Australia, but there's a lot of talk about how to make this as accessible around the world and equitable as possible. And very much to your point, you have to be able to enable countries to do it themselves, but then there are also infrastructure challenges, there are cost issues, training issues, and so on. I'd be very curious to know how the work that you're doing develops and how some of the learnings there might affect other fields like uh, newborn screening and genomics, because it's a universal problem that still requires a scalable solution.
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert in those areas, but I think if it's a product that like a drug or a vaccine, I think then you can, like I say, try to make it inexpensive enough, try to make it maybe that you only have to take it once. We've worked on those kinds of strategies, like, um, and, and we've been, I'd say, scientifically successful on those. Then you also need manufacturing. I think, to your point, I ultimately think to really get things to be successful in broad areas, especially new areas, you have to have education in those countries, where people take the initiative, whether it's building companies or at the universities or high schools, or I think and so that's why I've tried to do that as well.
Hmm. What is and you can choose to answer this question or not, but what's your perspective on the U.S.'s competitive position when it comes to science and technology over the coming years or decade? Obviously, a lot of changes. I'm at Harvard, and we're experiencing some challenges right now. And I see other countries, China and others, investing heavily in uh, in AI and genomics and many other fields. Are you bullish on the U.S.'s opportunities going forward? Are you concerned? What's your perspective on where the U.S. stands right now?
Well, I mean, overall, I'm always bullish on the U.S. I think the U.S. attitude of risk taking, of entrepreneurism, as curiosity driven research, I think it's done terrific, and I think that that's really enabled the U.S. to be where it is today. I do think that attacking, cutting out grants, making life more difficult at the universities, I think you can already see, some outstanding scientists, some outstanding, undergraduates and graduates go to overseas universities. So I think that will take a hit, but I'm still, because of some of these policies, again, and so forth, but I still believe that the United States will do great because, of the kind of culture it's had for the last 250 years. And so I'm still overall optimistic, but I think, we'll maybe be a little less great than we were.
Mhm. So, Bob, we started with questions about your early upbringing and the things that influence your thinking and your approach to science and technology. As the last question, when people look back 100 years from now, what do you hope your legacy will be, not just in terms of inventions, but in how you shape science, health, and the people who followed you?
Well, I hope my legacy will be that I'm someone who, really changed the field, helped build the field of bioengineering, biomedical engineering, and trained several generations of great scientists who collectively, along with myself, made inventions and discoveries that made a big impact on not only science but on human health in the world.
Well, I can say firsthand that uh, you and I was a part of helping launch one of your companies at this point, 25 years ago. 2000 was when Transform, we started it. And it's been really such a privilege to know you. You are an incredibly kind and generous person. And I've seen that with so many people that have worked with you in your labs and in your companies. And it has been truly an honor to have been a part of your successes and also to have you here on this podcast. So with that, thank you so much, Bob, for being a part of Unnatural Selection. And I hope that we can talk again sometime soon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Great to see
Thank you, Bob.
That was Dr. Bob Langer. Now, unnatural signals.
This episode is a reminder that world-changing breakthroughs rarely look important at the beginning. The world that led to RNA medicine started with a simple but stubborn problem: how to get fragile molecules into cells without destroying them. The solution, lipid nanoparticles, took years to matter and decades to prove its value. What made that possible wasn't just scientific insight, it was leadership that protected long-term curiosity, an environment where asking what's next was valued even when there was no immediate payoff. Dr. Langer's story also shows how nonlinear impact really is. Early research often looks disconnected from its eventual outcome. You can't predict which ideas will change the world, only that they won't if you stop investing in them too soon. The deeper signal is patience. Breakthroughs don't arrive on schedule, but they do arrive when institutions are willing to stay the course.
Thanks for listening to Unnatural Selection. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone shaping the future. Explore more at unnaturalselection.net and connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, keep evolving.